Welcome along to Film Talk. I'm Richard Edwards, and I'm delighted to say we're joined yet again by the incredibly wonderful film guru, film expert, film historian. That is Mark Priest. Mark, welcome back to Film Talk.
Hello, Richard. Good to be here.
Good to see you again. And today we are discussing a wonderful film series, the original Star Wars trilogy. That is to say, episodes 4, 5 and 6. Those three first films that are, in our view, the absolutely best part of the Star Wars franchise.
Governor Tuck, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
Charming to the last.
Good. Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the heat flow through you.
So there we are. That's the original Star Wars trilogy. Certainly the original, in our point of view, episodes 4, 5 and 6. A New Hope released in December 1977 in the UK, May in the US. And then The Empire Strikes Back in May 1980. And then The Return of the Jedi in May 1983. Episodes 4, 5 and 6. We probably gloss over episodes 1 to 3 a bit later. But those, for us, I think, are the absolute starting point of what is an incredible franchise, but also groundbreaking in filmmaking, film culture, and our own personal culture and family as well. It's astonishing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Star Wars is, encapsulates so much, and I know we're going to talk about it, but, it really did start, just not just a wonderful franchise, but it opened up the dreams for so many people to do other things. And, just going back to what you said, I remember going to see the first opening weekend at the Odeon in Brighton on the very large screen they had there. The largest it was in Sussex, I think, at the time. And obviously, you're right. There was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of activity about Star Wars for a good few months beforehand. So we weren't quite sure what we were going to see, and we weren't let down. My goodness me, I was so excited to see it. And it didn't let me down at all. It was a great, great film, as we all know. But so I was probably about 17 at the time. What an impact it had on me! I absolutely loved it. The music, absolutely wonderful.
I was much younger at the time by comparison. I just saying, but I remember, yes, Odeon St Albans. In Hertfordshire is where I saw it. Yes. The Odeon in St Albans, it was a great cinema. It closed, I think, in the 90s. It's reopened now under new management. It's been renovated. Lovely place. But it's the Odeon St Albans is where I saw Star Wars, all three Star Wars films, in fact. Life of Brian, Wild Geese, Moonraker, all these, lots of kind of life-changing movies in many respects. But yeah, seeing Star Wars there in, I think it was January 1978. And like you say, we'd heard, because it'd been released in the US in May, and the hype about this incredibly groundbreaking, earth-shattering movie was really intense. And so the expectation by the time it got to the UK was kind of on a knife edge. It was astonishing.
Absolutely. Very, very exciting. And I remember the trailer so well, because the trailer was being plugged more and more with films leading up to the time it was released. Which obviously, because of the success in America, they knew they were onto a good one, so they were plugging it all the time. And I just remember watching the trailer and thinking, "Wow, this is like," and that's what we've got to imagine. Remember that in those days there was nothing like this,
nothing at all.
No, so it really was incredible to see visually. Just the impact was massive. But I loved the story. I remember being so surprised that I really just thought it was going to be a love story between Carrie Fisher's, Princess Leia, and Mark Hamill, and it wasn't.
Thankfully, it turns out. Thankfully,
yes, exactly. And so there was lots of twists and turns at the time, which we all come to. We know the story so well now, but at the time, it really wasn't that clear. and it kept you on the edge of your seats with the action. It was just a phenomenal impact it had on me personally. And I do believe this as well, that there's a legacy with Star Wars that we all know about. And I remember being very proud taking my sons to see a reissued versions of Star Wars. I think it was in the 90s, to Brighton again. And I know they've seen the films on DVD, but this was actually to see it in the cinema, and they had to come with me. And I remember being very proud about that. And it just, it rekindled my interest, but also brought those younger people into, loving Star Wars. And they still do now. And hopefully they'll do that with their children as well at some point in the future.
But also visually, the film was just incredible. I remember the opening, the spaceship comes flying over. You think, wow, that's really impressive. And then this enormous spaceship comes flying over, and it just seems to go on and on and on forever.
Yes.
All of which you've got John Williams' amazing music, very orchestral music, very different for the times, 70s pop.
Yes.
It seemed to be so completely different. And you were hooked as soon as that big spaceship came over. You were absolutely pulled right into it, and it never let you go for the entire movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole thing just dragged you in. You were immersed into the movie. And I remember in the Odeon in Brighton, I think that was one of the first screens that had like stereo sound. I'm not sure it was Dolby even in those days, because I think they had to enhance the cinemas at some point. But it certainly was impressive. And this is on the back of seeing Close Encounters, which was a great film, in 75, I think that was. So that was full of some really good effects and sort of quite a good impact. Previous to that, 2001, fantastic in many ways.
You talk about 2001, for example, which is all shiny, everything looks pristine and very clean. The world that Lucas created in Star Wars, it's beaten up, it's used, this is a working environment, scuff marks on the floor. It's not that shiny, pristine show home of a spaceship. This is working.
Yes.
A working spaceship. And, that was very different. You weren't seeing that before.
No.
And the characters were kind of ordinary, everyday characters. You were kind of following, which is like a Kurosawa technique of taking a big story, but then telling the story by following the lives of two of the smaller people within that.
Yes.
So you're not seeing the big characters, but some of the smaller characters. And I think that's, where he's kind of leading the story with the droids. They were perhaps the least significant of the characters, but quite often you're seeing it from their perspective. And that's an old technique, but a very effective technique for telling that kind of story. Yes.
I thought C-3PO was just an amazing character. It makes me smile just thinking about it now. And R2-D2. Everybody has had favourites, didn't they? Yoda, it's just Frank Oz, wasn't it? He was his voice they used.
That's right, yeah.
Just enchanting, so clever, and I just another one of those films. I just didn't want it to end because it was just so exciting. I carried on watching it for hours and hours, and great leads as well. Harrison Ford, as we all think the world of him in Indy, but Han Solo, fantastic. What a bravado character, and he played it perfectly. As I mentioned, Princess Leia, beautiful. You break a few hearts for sure. And I thought, and of course, how can we forget Darth Vader? What a menacing, excellent character that was. And I just remember the deep breathing, just that sense of intensity and fear and evil. Oh, it was wonderful. And of course, our good friend, or your good friend especially, Peter Cushing.
Absolutely, yes.
Grand
Moff Tarkin.
Just right across the board. Fantastic characters, great acting, and we must say the soundtrack was absolutely wonderful. The music for Star Wars, of course, absolutely up there. Not just the main title, but actually, I loved all the rest of the tracks as well.
The sound design as well, the sound effects, the laser, all these sounds had to be created obviously don't exist in our world, but to make it in a way that's quite authentic to the story you're trying to tell. So all the sound design was incredible all the way through. And you're listening to some of the stories, how they went and got some of those real sounds, you know, and put that into the movie. I mean, the sound design, there's lots of features and extras on some of the DVDs, but looking at how they did the sound design is really interesting. You know, banging on electricity cables at transmitters just to get that kind of reverberation of metal is astonishing. But what's interesting you say that is because, you know, we saw it all at the cinema, but we didn't have home video immediately. But then you started getting the video releases on VHS.
Yes.
Laserdisc. I remember having a Laserdisc of Return of the Jedi. It's the only one I had for some bizarre reason. And just thinking how fantastic the stereo sound was to listen to it at home.
But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
Now, for its 20th anniversary, the adventure of a lifetime returns to the big screen.
These are the films, especially Star Wars, that, you know, probably changed the way that we watch TV in our homes. They were the starts. Because, you know, we had, you know, the televisions of those days would just have a single small speaker. If you listen to it now, we'd probably be horrified.
And there's been multiple versions of the films released that have been digitally enhanced, and George Lucas has been able to go back and put in elements, effects, shots that perhaps he wasn't able to do or couldn't afford to do when it was originally released. And that looks great, but there's a bit of a groundswell amongst fans to go back and seeing the original theatrical version. I'm quite pleased that I've been able to get hold of a DVD set from eBay, which has the enhanced films, but also on the second disc, what's said to be the original theatrical release. And so you go, because I really wanted to relive and go back and revisit that 1978 experience.
I think it's amazing that he wasn't even allowed initially to put on the chapters at the beginning. That was seen as too confusing to the audience to say this was chapter 4 for A New Hope. And he obviously got his way in the end as the thing got more successful. But he really did try. He did change the way that films were made, didn't he? Quite significantly.
Oh, I mean, he recognised that in order to achieve some of the visual effects for the film, the way he wanted it. So first of all, from the editing point of view, that when they were editing it, they hadn't made the visual effects, but what he did was to cut in newsreel footage from the Second World War of fighters and bombers in aerial battles. Then ILM that he'd created to create the visual effects kind of matched those shots. So what you're seeing, the way that the spaceships are fighting and engaging, is actually mimicking what he found in some of the old newsreel footage of these World War II battles. Yep. But even before, you know, in 1975, I think it was, or 75, as he was preparing to make the film, he established ILM as a company to create, which was just like a couple of geeks to begin with, but as a business to try and create some of these visual effects. And as a result of Star Wars, you know, we've got ILM is one of the world's leading visual effects production houses. Yep. You know, he created and invested in the computer technology and invented the Pixar computer, which then led to really strong computer animation and Pixar computers, which is now part of Disney. And his investment in new technology to find new ways of achieving something. You know, they created Edit Droid and Sound Droid, which were the world's first non-linear editors for video and audio editors. So we owe a lot to how we make films today digitally. And the tools we can use to really help that filmmaking process to George Lucas and his imagination. He really pushed back against corporations running the film industry, and so he kind of wanted to do his own thing and set up base in San Francisco. Yes, it's not that far from Los Angeles. It's a bit of a short flight, but it's far enough away to be truly independent. Yes. What's quite ironic is that in pushing back against the corporations that ran Hollywood, he ended up becoming a corporation in himself.
This looks like it's our work. It's not my fault.
No light speed.
It's not my fault.
Because I'd obviously fallen in love with Star Wars, I remember going to the Odeon Leicester Square to seeing Empire. And again, that just, a darker movie in many ways. But I thought that was absolutely amazing a film as well. And in some ways, I actually prefer it to the first one in a strange sense, because it's that slightly darker a movie.
When he wrote the original Star Wars script, this was like 200 pages long or close to it.
Yes.
So he divided it into 3, and that's where the 3 films came from. And so The Empire Strikes Back is effectively the second act of that original screenplay. And as they say in most stories, the second act is usually the darkest, where all the horrible things happen, and then it gets better and you get success, and hopefully people triumph at the end of the third act. Erwin Kershner, I think, was the director of Empire, because George directed the first one, but I just probably found that too much, and so getting in directors for the other films and him producing was quite a shift for him too, I think.
Quite noticeable, I think, actually, and a really clever thing to do, because it just kept the thing alive, didn't it? It kept it really excited, and the hype was obviously so phenomenal. And so many movies, the sequel is so disappointing, but Empire, it was, it's just one of my favorite. There were some clues coming out as to how the story was going to unfold, especially with Luke's father. It didn't let me down at all, and I remember being completely in love with the film, and I've seen it so many times. And with
Jedi, do you think that's a suitable climax to the trilogy?
It's a good film. It's a really good film. I remember this is going back some time now, but originally it was going to be called Revenge of the Jedi.
That's right, yeah.
And they changed it. And if anybody's got a T-shirt or poster from those days, apparently it's worth a fortune now. It was trying to play to the audience, a younger audience as well, and make it a bit more cuddlier, and maybe suited that audience. But for me, it probably it took the edge off it a little bit. It's still a great film, and it's certainly exciting and all the rest of it. But yeah, the first 2 for me are the better movies.
I suppose in some ways, the Jedi wouldn't. Revenge is not really the kind of human trait you wanted to portray of that sort of character, or those kind of individuals like the Jedis. But you wouldn't expect them to take revenge. They would triumph through right.
Yes.
Rather than revenge.
Yeah,
I suppose maybe that's part of it too. But as a package overall, it works incredibly well. I mean, I do know what you mean about The Empire Strikes Back. It's a very strong, it's very dark, very hard hitting film, and so it's dramatically has more impact, I think, than the other 2. But as a package, the 3 together as 3 acts of one story is very, very strong in itself as one trilogy.
Yes.
But they do work as standalone films in their own right as well. But Empire, as you say, is the stronger of the 3 in many respects.
Yeah.
It's interesting now that the franchise has spawned 9 films in Star Wars itself, plus Rogue One, Solo.
Yes, yeah, which I really
11, a Mandalorian TV series, other TV series and cartoon series, and other bits and bobs, radio dramas.
Numerous. Yes.
God, it's just never ending.
It is a phenomenal franchise. And the 3 middle films, as we call it, 1, 2, and 3 in the chapters. To be honest, I was a little bit disappointed. Still enjoyed them, but they weren't there as far as I was concerned compared to the first 3 movies. Not quite the same feel. Some of the characters, Jar Jar Binks in particular,
what was that
didn't
about?
work for me. I know, and actually, I know that the audience didn't really get that either. Some of the CGI was not quite as good as as we probably would have expected at the time, and was noticeable. And I think you've said in the past, cartoonish.
Certainly when the Clone War battle thing was going, I just think, well, am I watching a cartoon here?
Yes.
And the effects with the volcano lava flows and.
Yes.
It's all just masses and masses of CGI, and anything that's real is that little character, and even sometimes not even real there.
Yes.
And they did feel like they'd become the animated cartoons that Lucas said he didn't want to make. I mean, some people might say, and I've said it myself sometimes, yes, but it's been very successful at the box office. But I think if George Lucas released a film that had Star Wars in the title, whatever it was, it would take a lot of money. And so I think that box office measure isn't really the measure you could go by, because it's bound to have done well at the box office anyway. There's enough fans in the world that would have gone to see it. And so the first three, even though commercially were successful, you have to take a step back from purely the box office number and that kind of commercial side of it and say, as a story, as character, as visual presentation, as the package of filmmaking. And I felt the first three weren't as strong as the middle three. Yes. And of the final three, they're kind of okay. I quite liked all three of those.
Them. Yeah, I did, actually. Yes, I thought there were J.J. Abrams in the first and the third one. Was good. I enjoyed them very much. Enjoyed the theatre of it. Enjoyed the storyline. I know there was a lot of criticism about the second movie. I thought it was okay. Again, the difficulty is for these guys. They're trying to cram in what everybody wants to see, and deliver everything that everybody wants. And sometimes it gets a bit messy.
And I mean, what is it? The Last Jedi was the middle of those. And it was Ryan Johnson directed those. With the other two, as you say, J.J. Abrams, who is a master at action,
absolutely,
and adventure on screen. Yes. But Ryan Johnson is a very talented filmmaker in his own right. Let's not underestimate his capability. I quite liked that story, the middle one. Solo didn't really pull me in at all, to be honest.
No, there's a lot of problems in the background, wasn't there? Ron Howard was brought in at the last minute, and you can see that it just didn't gel properly, which is a shame actually, because I was really looking forward to that. And as I say, I like Rogue One. I thought that was a very good movie, a very solid film. And I had the benefit of seeing all three of the last Star Wars movies at the IMAX in Milton Keynes. And so you've got the best you can
the full impact.
Get. Yes. And going back to your point after the second one, I remember coming out at the end and actually being really exhilarated by it. And I remember chatting to complete strangers my age, and we were all saying, that was actually back to the original series and the original three movies. We actually all felt it was really very, very good indeed. And so it did get some unfair criticism that I didn't quite understand. But, everybody's opinion. But I thought they were very good, solid films.
But it all goes back to January 1978 in the UK, May 77. And so May the 4th has become Star Wars Day, which is why we're doing this now, to tie in with Star Wars Day 2021. What is that? That's 43 years, coming up to 44 years. I mean, we must have been just very young at that time when we saw these films ago. And yet, here we are, 43 years later, still talking about it.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
And just, look at all the other movies and things that happened that we mentioned. But we wouldn't have had probably Indiana Jones. We probably wouldn't have had Tomb Raider. We probably wouldn't even be having some of the TV games that we get now. Some of the, because all of that came from that type of movie, Star Wars especially.
And we wouldn't have Elstree Studios where we've been and worked in the past.
Exactly. Yes, that would have probably been another supermarket.
Well, half of it is now, but I mean, it was saved because, it was about to close.
Yeah.
And Lucas needed a lot of space, and he was able to get. They were thinking of going to Rome to film.
Oh, yes, I remember that. Yeah,
But they ended up going because Elstree was empty.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they ended up going there, and it's what saved it. And they came back again and again, but even though there were strict union rules and the British way of doing things compared to the American, but they just loved the space, the freedom, and the craftsmanship of the filmmakers over here. That kind of really made a big difference.
Absolutely.
So it kind of helped save the British film industry in many respects. So we owe a lot to George Lucas. We always said we would end these now by talking about how people can see Not that you would really struggle to find where on earth
No.
you would go and see the Star Wars movies. So
Yes.
you're watching this on YouTube, so of course YouTube movies, there's the links, we'll put them down below as well. You can go and rent them or buy them that way. There's DVDs left, right and centre. Just buy one second hand for a couple of quid on eBay.
Yes.
I mean, they're available.
Yes.
Getting to see the movies, and they turn up all over the place. I think they're all on Disney Channel now, aren't they? Disney Plus subscription.
Yes.
You get to
Yes.
see them all there. So
But if you've still got a DVD player, I would still get the DVD because you do get a slightly. I still think you get an enhanced picture from a DVD compared to streaming.
Yeah.
And certainly the sound effects at 5.1 or whatever you've got, it's even better.
And there's tons of extras and features and commentary from George Lucas. And extras in there that help enhance
Absolutely.
the experience, particularly for fans. So
Exactly.
easily available. And it's just one of those things you want to have. Nice to have a copy to keep and go back and see again and again. 43 years ago and we're still talking about it. Incredible.
Well, Richard, it's just a phenomenon, isn't it? And I've enjoyed just talking about it because it's exhilarating.
So may the 4th be with you.
May the force be with you, Richard. Thank
Happy Star Wars Day.
you. Cheers.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.
Be great to know what you think, so do leave some comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit that little bell icon to get a notification every time we release a new video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.